I'm Meena Bohra from Scientist Nepal, uh, extending a warm welcome to everyone connected with us right now. I hope you all are taking necessary precautions and staying safe. As we are all aware, the novel coronavirus has been a great challenge to humanity. The pandemic has and will have long adverse impacts. At this historic crisis, scientists around the world are working together vigorously to participate in this endeavor. An e-platform, Scientist Nepal was formed involving self-motivated professionals working in various research institutions and universities. The platform came into effect spontaneously after the declaration of pandemic by WHO and lockdown announcement in Nepal. It aims to mobilize Nepal's scientific community to get involved and contribute to the global effort of dealing with COVID-19 through knowledge generation and sharing. One of the activities that Scientist Nepal is doing is a regular sessions and has completed 49 sessions so far. To mark the 50th session of Scientist Nepal, we are here in an international panel discussion on ensuring sustainability in the post-pandemic era. So with this short note, once again, a warm welcome to everyone, and those who are those everyone who is also who have joined us in Facebook Live as well, and a warm welcome to the program where Scientist Nepal is celebrating its Golden Jubilee. To begin with, we have with us Professor Dr. Kedar Rizal, Coordinator of Scientist Nepal, to chair the session. Dr. Rizal is a professor in the Central Department of Environmental Science, Tribhuvan University. So I would like to request Professor Rizal to kindly chair the session.
Thank you, Professor Meena. Madam, thank you very much. Please proceed the program.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
with your permission, I would like to proceed the program. And because we are exactly on time and without any delay, I would like to invite Dr. Pravin Shrestha from Scientist Nepal for a welcome remark, and also would like to request him to share a quick updates about the activities of Scientist Nepal. Dr. Shrestha is a chief neurosurgeon at BNB Hospital and coordinator of today's program. So Pravin sir, once again, welcome to you as well, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meena. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, let me share my slide. I hope everybody is able to see my slide. Okay. Namaste and good evening, everybody. Very, very warm regards and greetings on my own behalf and on behalf of the whole organizing committee of this today's program and international panel discussion. Well, I am Pravin Shrestha, a medical doctor by profession and a neurosurgeon by my specialization. I have been working as a neurosurgeon for last more than 15 years in Kathmandu, Nepal. And at the moment, I feel proud to say I am one of the active members of Scientist Nepal. Well, as everybody knows, as you all know, today we are celebrating this 50th session of Scientist Nepal online activities. We have already completed 49th session and today is 50th session. Well, this is a golden jubilee in that context. And today we are celebrating this golden jubilee of Scientist Nepal in the form of international panel discussion. And today, basically, we'll be discussing about ensuring sustainability in the post-pandemic period. We'll be discussing these things with the presence of great experts in various aspects of sustainable development. In this regard, first, I would like to welcome you all to this program. Especially, I would like to extend warm welcome to our international panelists, our guest speakers, Professor Pariji, Professor Onono, Professor Takal, and Professor Papasol. Thank you very much for kindly accepting our program today. Well, with this brief welcome note, I would like to extend some of the brief history of Scientist Nepal and how it is going ahead in this pandemic period. Well, before telling something about Scientist Nepal, I would like to go back to brief history of corona infection in the world. Well, as you all know, there was corona infection outbreak since early 2020. It's already more than 1 year that we are having this problem all over the world. As you know, initially the name of the virus was novel coronavirus. It was named novel coronavirus because it was something newer than or different from previous coronaviruses. But later it was named as human coronavirus because it was found to have some typical ability to infect human being very easily and to transfer the infection from one human to another human being quite quickly and easily. But again later, finally, WHO named the virus SARS-CoV-2 on 11 February 2020, and the disease caused by this SARS-CoV-2 was named as COVID-19 by WHO. As you all know, this SARS-CoV-2 means severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. Well, then WHO declared pandemic. No, it's WHO declared public health emergency of international concern on 30th January 2020, and finally on 11th March 2020, WHO declared pandemic all over the world. And then many countries accordingly implemented lockdown, and the similar lockdown was implemented in Nepal also. It was first on 24th March 2020, which was extended many times till 11th of June. It was almost 80 days of complete lockdown that time. Well, as you know, lockdown means complete restriction of physical activities in group or in mass or maybe even individually. But even though there is restriction in physical activities, definitely there is no restriction or there is no lockdown for the intellectual activities. Since the lockdown started in Nepal, many scientists, especially many people who are working in different fields of science, they started discussing with each other. They started discussing and meeting with each other through the various online media, and they started thinking they have to do something. They have to contribute to society in such a critical situation somehow. So finally, what they made was a Scientist Nepal. Today we call it Scientist Nepal. And in fact, in this with this background, I should say, pandemic is the mother of Scientist Nepal. And probably I can say that I can also say that lockdown is probably the father of Scientist Nepal. And we all the participants of today's program are the children of Scientist Nepal. So let's continue to support Scientist Nepal in the days to come as well. Well, with this brief introduction of Scientist Nepal, a few more slides. So Scientist Nepal is, as Dr. Meena has already explained, it's an online group. Basically, it's an e-platform of Nepalese not only scientists but technologists, technicians, and innovationists. It is basically a constructive force to deal with any disaster, not only corona and pandemic, but any disaster, social problems, or any discrepancies in a society. And in fact, it is at the moment, it is an experiment of an attempt to serve the whole society. So this is what Scientist Nepal is. And at the moment, since it is the era of pandemic, since it is the time of corona infection and pandemic, so at the moment, Scientist Nepal is basically to deal with COVID-19. And it was founded on the basis of several conceptions. For example, e-platform, especially in this era of technology, era of online communication technology, which has wide network with instant access. The Scientist Nepal is based on e-platform concept. Its another conception is integration of multiple disciplines of the science. So it is integrated multi-science group of people. And its another conception is basically to appeal everybody to perceive, to contemplate, and to act, being based on the science. So as the name suggests, Scientist Nepal is science, science, and science, and nothing else. And with the basis of these scientific knowledge, experience, and skills, we are trying to contribute to our society in this pandemic period. Well, regarding activities of Scientist Nepal so far, in 2020, late March or early April, there was such a discussion going on in all the provinces of Nepal. In Nepal, there are 7 provinces at the moment. And in all the provinces, the meetings were held, online meetings with the help of this online technology in all the provinces with many participants like this. And that time there was a discussion about testing of the COVID. That means whether these testings are available or not locally. They discussed about preparation of proposals and submitting to the government or local authorities. We also discussed about webinars, how to conduct different webinars and how to move ahead our program. And we also discussed on the production of different educational materials. And we also discussed about collaborating with different national or government or non-government organizations, ministries like NAST and other universities. So public awareness was the main ultimate goal of Scientist Nepal, and it will be, it will remain as our own main goal forever. Mainly, it is the public awareness activities that Scientist Nepal has been carrying out. And similarly, as I have already explained, we have already completed 49 such sessions, weekly webinars, and today it is 50th. That is what we are trying to celebrate today as a Golden Jubilee. We also did, Scientist Nepal also did many publications, mainly online articles, pamphlets, other educational materials, and a book also. So this is one of those publications which Scientist Nepal has done about few months back after this corona pandemic. So this is basically a book named Corona Ka Sai Sawal. It's a Nepalese word. It is written in Nepali language, and it means 100 queries or 100 quests of about corona, and it has answers to all those 100 queries. So basically those 100 queries are divided into 4 categories in this small book. Those 4 categories are basically: number 1, coronavirus, about different questions about coronavirus; number 2, about COVID-19 and its impact in human body; number 3, about how to be safe, how to protect ourselves in this pandemic period; and number 4, fourth category in this book is different myths or misunderstandings and the facts about corona infection and pandemic. So this is what all about this book, and it has been distributed all over the country in all the 7 provinces free of cost by Scientist Nepal. And these are other activities supporting local government, other provinces. For example, this is Pokhara group, that is province number 4, and this is province number 5. They have made different proposals and different reports to support the local government to fight against COVID pandemic. And this is what today we are going to celebrate. We are celebrating at the moment this 50th session of Scientist Nepal as an international panel discussion. So these are the activities that we have been carrying out so far. And of course, we have future plans. We are going to widen our horizon of our activities with many nationals and national and international experts and agencies. And very soon, in near future, we are going to extend our program beyond the border of Nepal to the South Asian regional area, and to collaborate with all those countries regarding how we scientists, not only of Nepal, of these regional countries, can collaborate in contributing to our society in this pandemic period. Well, briefly, this much about Scientist Nepal, and we really hope to have your participation in the days to come as well. And thank you very much for giving this opportunity today. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Praveen, for your brief introduction about what Scientist Nepal is, what it's doing, and what its way forwards are. So now we are moving towards the main part of today's program. In fact, today's session, because we have focused on the panel discussion. So for this session, the moderator is Dr. Dinesh Raj Bhuju. Dr. Dinesh Bhuju is a academician at the National Academy of Science and Technology. He is also honorary professor at Midwestern University and visiting professor at Northwestern University, China. Besides, he has been leading various scientific forums, including Scientist Nepal. So now I would like to welcome Dr. Bhuju and hand over the session to him. Sir, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Meena Bohra, and namaste to all of you from Kathmandu, from the lap of the Himalaya. Well, dear participants, dear fellow scientists, technologists, we are in the historic peril of the pandemic, and no country is spared by this unseen virus, the novel coronavirus, which we have named SARS-CoV-2. Dr. Praveen Shrestha has elaborated about this disease and about this coronavirus. so I'm skipping it. And these pandemics actually have been predicted by the scientists for a long time. Many of us recall the Spanish influenza today. And we are facing the impacts of the pandemic on all walks of life. The impacts are seen and the impacts are felt in all development sectors. By the definition of sustainable development, they are the social, economic, and environmental. The participants, today's international panel discussion, the modality is like this. So we are going to have this in 2 rounds. The first introductory rounds, that is the expert professionals, the invited speakers will speak on their respective fields. And in the second round, we'll entertain the questions from the participants, for which I would like to request to put your questions in the chat box. From the social sector, we have chosen health because this is pandemic. So this is the major sector to which we have invited Dr. Giambattista Parigi. Dr. Parigi is a professor at the Department of Diagnostic, Pediatric, Clinical and Surgical Science at the University of Pavia, Italy. He is a widely traveled health expert, has worked in several countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. And he's a great fond of Nepal and a great climber as well. So he's so much eager to visit Nepal anytime. He already has vaccinated, so we are looking forward to welcoming him to Nepal. And Professor Parigi is a member of the World Federation Association Pediatric Surgery. He was national Italian delegate from 2000 to 2006. And then he was in European Board Pediatric Surgery and General Secretary from 1997 to 2007. And then he has been the president there since 2008. And also he was counselor of the Italian Society of Pediatric Surgery from 1992 to 1994. At Pavia, he also has another hat. That is, he looks after the Chekhovs, that is the international cooperation department there as its directors. Without much delay, I would like to request Professor Giambattista Parigi to kick off today's panel discussion. Professor Parigi.
Thank you very much, Dinesh. I'll share with you my screen, hopefully. Do you see it? Are you able to see my screen?
Perfect.
Very
Very
well.
clear.
Very well. Thank you very much, Professor Buju. Thank you, Dinesh. I'm so glad to be with you today, but so sorry to be there only via Zoom and not in presence, because in Nepal I have plenty of friends and there are plenty of mountains. Therefore, I really want to be with you as soon as possible. Let's go through quickly because I have 7 minutes and I'll run through it. Chum, God bless you. Why are you wishing God bless you to someone sneezing? What has to do God with a sneeze? Well, sneezing was the very, very first symptom of the Black Plague in 1336. When you were sneezing, either it was a trivial thing or you had just only 5 days of life more. And therefore, God bless you. And by the way, look at the date, 7 years. It took 7 years to develop the herd immunity in Europe at the cost of killing 1/3 of the European population. It's considered something around 50 million deaths for this herd immunity. Now we are in the middle of this pandemic, as you said. Now, this morning we were at 95 million cases. Nepal, luckily for you, is not so heavily afflicted, but the global deaths are over 2 million people. And you see here, US, Brazil, India, Mexico, those are the most affected. But, and the problem is going on. We are at all not over. These are the daily confirmed new cases. And you see the United States, they go up a lot, as well as Brazil, etc., etc. Therefore, we are still in the middle of the mess. I'll try to present you very quickly 10 topics around which I guess to focus the attention for social and health. First, the unpredictable happened, and it can therefore happen again. If you go back to the book of Harari, Homo Deus, written just 5 years ago, he was very optimistically saying, since some decades we put under control pandemics. Unfortunately, this was not true. We are not able to put under control pandemics. Number two, the probabilities of these new pandemics are much higher than 1 century ago. Dr. Buju spoke about the Spanish influenza, happened 1919 up to 1922. Well, at that time, the world population was 1.5 billion people. Now we are fivefold more, 7.5 billion. Going from Wuhan to Europe, for example, taking a ship, you should take 30 days. Now you take 12 hours. And therefore, the circulation of a lot more people is a lot more easy. Fivefold, sixfold, you can calculate very roughly 300 more possibilities than 1 century ago. Number three, for this reason, we need an early warning system, regardless of political cautions. There is an early warning system for tsunami. We must build up an early system not prone to political considerations. They said, I'm just referring what the newspaper said, that China has a lot of interest in Ethiopia. The president, the director of WHO, Ghebreyesus, is from Ethiopia, and so on and so forth. Italian case zero has been discovered through a skin biopsy the 10th of November 2019. Therefore, Professor Shrestha in his presentation spoke about early 2020. Unfortunately, the virus is around since possibly September 2019, and some authorities didn't discover this one timely. Therefore, we need to be much more timely in warning that is going on something wrong. Number four, the world's health problems caused by the virus are not directly related with the virus. It happened already with Ebola, for example. During Ebola pandemics in Western Africa 5-6 years ago, there were much more casualties among women needing, for example, a cesarean section and not going to the hospital because of fear of Ebola. The same happens now. People doesn't go to the hospitals for vaccinating children, for example, not vaccinating against COVID, vaccinating against measles, against tuberculosis, etc. C-sections are lowering. The tumors cure and care. We have a lot of problems with oncological people not going to the hospital because they're afraid of getting the COVID. And therefore, we will assist to an increase in mortality for tumors because of this problem. Number five, we therefore, as far as sustainability is concerned, we need to build up a resilient health system based on the redundancy principle and the hub and spoke principle. I cannot stay longer on that, but we need to organize hubs, let's say, for example, the central hospital in the main cities, with many spokes all around the country, each one interconnected in such a way, if I have a deficit in this spoke, I can either resort to the hub or to the other spoke. And the redundancy, I need to have masks, oxygen, etc., more than the standard needed, because otherwise I'll not be able to cope with an emergency. Number 6, we are speaking about health, but the most dangerous consequences will be, of course, on the social, on the economical. I don't want to invade the field of Dr. Onono after me, but just looking at these are the good exchange that is dropped dramatically. And therefore, this has well, a problem, an impact on social that is horrible. Number 7, we say, and we consider that the young people is not so much affected by the virus. That's true from the health point of view, is absolutely false from the social point of view. These young people is growing in a not interrelated community. We are facing now in Italy a strange event. It happened already 4 or 5 times that a lot of teenagers, 15, 16 years, they gather via the Twitter, Facebook, the social media, they gather in the middle of the city to fight each other, to express their fear of staying, their need to staying together in a very bad way. We were looking at people saying, oh, I have 437 friends on Twitter or whatsoever. But who is the real friend of yours? Now the situation is worsening a lot, and therefore young people are the most severely affected. Let's go a little bit on the optimistic point of view. What we learned, that medical research can do almost miracles. We are saying how it was possible to develop a vaccine in 10 months. Guys, if you have $18 billion invested in research, no bureaucratical problems, no restraints, and you can leave the researcher, the medical researcher, do their job without any problem, medical researcher can do quite a lot. I'm not saying miracles, but something like that. Why can't we imagine what could happen if we could give the same amount of money for the research against, let's say, malaria or tuberculosis or whatsoever? Medical research can do a lot. It has been demonstrated. We must think in the long run, in the next years, to foster this concept. Number 9. We are doing exactly, we're living this one, long distance learning, posed a new paradigm in worldwide academic interaction. What Dr. Shrestha said, pandemic is the mother of Scientist Nepal, is the mother of all this kind of interaction. Tomorrow, I leave this kind of lectures with Tripoli in Libya. We are going on building up the university in Mogadishu, in Somalia, of Aden in Yemen, etc., etc. We learned a lot. We were forced to learn a lot, and therefore we must go on in this way. Last but not least, the international partnership. You know that the Sustainable Development Goals, the number 17, the very last, says that we must strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership. We are somewhat forced and invited to do this kind of a job. We are doing this in this very moment. We have to take into account that for the, let's say, resilience, for the reconstruction after post-COVID, we'll need heavily to base on this kind of international partnership, as well as involving the third sector, not only the public sector, not only the private sector, but mostly the third sector. Universities, for example, can be duly posed into the third sector, as well as societies or societies of the civil society organization, non-profit organization, and so on, because through them it has been demonstrated that the efficacy and effectiveness of the operation will be absolutely paramount. I'm over. I hope to see you quickly in Kathmandu. I beg you to take care of you, because we are trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We have to stay and to hold and to resist until the end. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. It's a great beginning. Well, the pandemic is itself a very serious and very crucial issue. Thank you so much, Professor Parisi, who has just elaborated how this pandemic is impacting on the health issues of in the humanity. And most importantly, he raised a very provocative issue that what if this billion-dollar project of vaccine is spent on more serious diseases like malaria and many others. So it's a very provocative and very important question, I believe. And finally, he concluded his statement, his presentation by pinpointing, by emphasizing the importance of SDG 17, that is the international partnership. Thank you very much, Professor Parisi. And let's move on. We have the next pillar of this sustainable development, that is the economy, for which we have invited Dr. Perez Onono. Dr. Perez Ayeko Onono is currently a dean at the School of Economics at Kenyatta University, Kenya. She is a graduate of agriculture economics from Egerton University, and she also holds masters from the Kenyatta University, from where she did her PhD. Before joining Kenyatta University in 2008, Dr. Onono worked as a teacher under the Teacher Service Commission, and also she has served as the head of the technical subjects there in Kenya. So we have this economist, this lady economist from Africa, and that the virus, well, of course, this is more concerned with health, but this is also delivering. I mean, this coronavirus is also delivering a significant global shock. And a baseline global pandemic scenario sees gross domestic product fall by 2% below the benchmark for the world, and 2.5% for the developing countries like Nepal, and 1.8% for the industrial countries. And that was by the World Bank some months ago. But recently, the United Nations, they have published a report saying that the global economy could shrink by almost 1% this year, that is 0.9%. So this is the scenario of the macroeconomics. And what about the microeconomics? Where, a lot of youth, especially, they are losing their job, which is nearly 15.1% in some of the countries, some of the developing countries. So what does it mean? It means we are losing job, you are losing income, which will have a direct impact on the economy of the household, economy of the bazaar, everything. So for this, I would like to invite Dr. Perez Onono to elaborate. Dr. Perez Onono, it's your time now, Madam.
Thank you so much, Professor Dinesh. And thank you very much, Scientist Nepal for this honor to be part of this conversation around sustainability in the post-pandemic. Definitely, this has been a conversation that is going on across the world. Many people are thinking of how do we move forward post the pandemic. We yet do not even talk about being in the post-pandemic because we are still right in the middle of it. The problem seems to be stationary with us, and we are resuming normalcy amid its uncertainty, and still some of the ravaging effects of the pandemic is within many economies. I've prepared a small presentation on this just to ignite some thoughts around this conversation, which is also common.
Perez?
Yes.
Perez, would you mind to put the slides in the slideshow, please?
Okay, thank you very much. I will do that. Is that okay?
Fine, perfect.
Yes, I'm saying I'm just having a brief presentation that could extend further the conversations around the economic effects of the pandemic and the possible suggested ways of getting out of it for the global economies as well as country-specific scenarios. Of course, as we are aware, the pandemic has impacted greatly on world economies through the effects that have been felt in production, as well as disruptions that have been experienced in supply chains. Many countries, because of the lockdowns, as well as the stay-home orders, restricted movements, restricted flow of goods and services, many countries have recorded contraction in many sectors, which have been leading contributors to economic growth and job creation in those countries. So many countries are reporting negative and contracted growth rates. And as Professor Dinesh has correctly put it, the World Bank and other international bodies have projected significant declines and contractions in projected growth that was forecasted before the pandemic hit many of those countries. So as I've said, one of the ways in which this has come has of course been direct effects on production. In countries, output in many sectors we know is driven by private demand. But because of recorded reduction in private consumption, exacerbated by the loss of incomes, many production firms actually reduced their levels of production. And apart from the household demands, we see in many services, many schools, hotels, because of no arrivals of tourists and traders, the micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are usually also a very high level demanders of products in economies, as they remained closed indefinitely. So it facilitated a closure of some production plants, but at the same time, those that were operating in many economies were producing below full capacity. This actually caused losses of jobs, with some firms actually calling on their staff to take unpaid compulsory leaves, so that we find that the problem of loss of incomes was really aggravated in the economies. But at the global level, we see the interconnectedness between countries through trade, really implying that when you experience a slowdown in one country, this is essentially easily exported to the rest of the world. And this has been what has caused the massive reduction in economic activities, because a slowdown is experienced in one country due to the pandemic, and many countries experience this slowdown simultaneously at the same time, and then these are exported to the rest of the world. Why? It is simply because many companies rely on sales in other countries to meet their financial goals, but at the same time, the growth of manufacturing in many countries, which is considered a prerequisite for economic transformation, is driven by imports of intermediate inputs from other countries. So we find a forward and backward linkages between countries, so that when we have a problem in one country, then it is easily transmitted to the rest of the world. If we suppose even in the initial stages that this problem that began in China was not replicated anywhere in the world, so that it just remained a serious health challenge for China, because of the lockdowns and the closures of farms in China, we find that imports into China from the leading exporters to China, like Korea, Japan, and other Asian economies, would still suffer. And this suffering would still be exported to other countries that are in trade with Korea, Japan, and other Asian countries. However, the situation has been worsened because of the multiple problems that have been experienced across the economies. So if we look at basically international trade as it were, then we find that the volumes of trade in major world economies really went down. And if we look at this table here, which is giving us a brief on data to see by May what was happening, May of 2020, what was happening in most of the world economies, we see that the level of exports from the world had gone down, all over the world had gone down by 18%, and imports had gone down by that time by 15%. This is the point where many of the world economies were actually in the heart of the pandemic. But again, at individual country levels, looking at USA, looking at Japan and China, and even the Africa and Middle East countries, data is pointing to really diminished trade that was happening in this time. What are the implications of these trade effects? The issue was reduced supply of goods and services, and of course, when this happens, our little economics tells us that when we have less supply of goods and services, then the standards of living on consumers are forced reduces, as they are forced to consume more of local goods at higher prices. But the reduced demand for exports also lead to lower unit prices, and overall the incomes for exporters go down. And when looking at Kenyan case as an example, one of the key sectors that are leading in exports in Kenya is in agriculture. And in agriculture, we get a lot of our export earnings from tea and horticulture. Now, when we look at the year-on-year changes, then when you compare all the months from the time the pandemic hit our country in March 2020, when you compare the unit prices that were received for our principal exports, they were all going south. In other words, we were receiving lower prices on low volumes of the exports that were leaving the country. Now, the implications of this is that really we have the low incomes. You can see, and apart from just recording year-on-year reduction in unit prices, another implication is that in each month as we moved from March all the way to June, we see that overall, on average, the trend was going down, implying that in the trade area, which is one of the significant sectors in the economy in terms of generating income for some aspects of the population, generating foreign exchange, which is critical in building international reserves for the economy, was actually worsening by day. And this has been an experience across many countries, not only Kenya. I'm choosing Kenya because I have access to the data at hand. Now, what would be the impacts of these falling export earnings? One is exchange rate depreciation. Because of the reduced supply of foreign currency into the country, of course, with reduced earnings, reduction in tourism arrival, tourists arrival, reduction in foreign investments into economies, then you find the supply of foreign currencies in each country going down. And when supply goes down and people still demand perhaps to import goods and services because they are critical, especially for inputs that are critical in manufacturing, then the impact is that the currency value really depreciates. In Kenya, for example, post-pandemic from March, if we look at from March all the way to December, for all major currencies, the US dollar, the Japanese yen, the euro, the British sterling pound, all of them were, in terms of the value of the Kenya shilling against these currencies was going up. And we actually experienced an unprecedented depreciation of our currency in this pandemic period. The immediate consequences, of course, is that we are experiencing rising import bills for essential inputs, which would be expected to translate to higher product prices. And another area where the falling export earnings would really impact on economies is on debt sustainability. A fall in export earning always reduces ability of a country to service its external debt. And the implication is you borrow more externally to finance the debt. You seek debt relief as an alternative if you cannot borrow more. But of course, in many of our countries, a good proportion of the external debt is commercial. For example, in Kenya, almost 1/3 of our external debt is commercial debt, which is very difficult to seek relief on or restructuring. And of course, as I've mentioned, the depreciation of currency increases the value of the stock of debt, so that over time, even if you don't add to your debt, it continues to increase. And also, in the immediate period, it also increases the cost of servicing that debt, a situation that may put many economies into debt distress. The implication here is that we may have governments in many economies ending up with non-sustainable borrowing and associated impacts such as increased cost of doing business, unstable fiscal policies, and reduced private investment. So looking post, and even as we say we are in the pandemic and we would be thinking of going over it, if really we continue experiencing a fall in export earnings, even if volumes would go up, but the unit prices on exports are going south, if there is no injection that would increase serious demand on products from other countries, then this will remain a serious problem. And many countries will actually be thrown into a situation of debt and sustainability. And of course, when that happens, there would be reduced resource allocations to critical sectors like health, water, sanitation, and energy, thereby compromising standards of living and growth. Going forward, then, we need to really think around this global and the global partnerships and relations across the world in coming up with sustainable interventions and sustainable economic policies that could be implemented to sustain recoveries going forward. And as I've just finished with elaborating on the debt situation, one of the key issues that in the global conversations must be addressed is the issue of dealing with the problem of debt. You remember early in the pandemic, the World Bank and other international institutions and bilateral partners of many developing economies extended an initiative called the Debt Suspension Initiative. And here it was calling on countries to apply for debt suspension from multilateral organizations as well as their bilateral donors. But now it is becoming more clear that even as the World Bank had extended this to the middle of 2021, if we are looking at the impacts of this in countries where growth and economic activities have heavily diminished, and at the same time, what we are experiencing is reducing mobilization of public revenues. It will become increasingly difficult for some of the economies to actually finance their debt. And perhaps like what the United Nations Conference of Trade and Development is suggesting about debt relief being a sustainable measure going beyond this pandemic might need to be considered so that there is some ease in fiscal policy interventions in countries. If governments must have sufficient fiscal resources to direct towards economic stimulus programs, they will really need resources, and denying these programs resources because countries are servicing debt would be really non-sustainable going into the future. The other issue is dealing with supply chain issues. And what has been in many conversations is increasing this South-South cooperation, deepening regional integration and trade in regions to build sustainable, shorter value chains. And of course, this would require concerted investments in more diversified production within regions. A situation, of course, which will require collaborative policy to attract FDI into regions, of course, while also paying attention to country-specific comparative advantages. We are moving to an era where we must not, within regions, start competing each other as countries to attract more investment into my country, even when I do not have a comparative advantage to sustain that particular investment. And therefore, this would really help. At the regional level, the supply shocks that we have experienced because of the disruptions of global supply chains could easily be dealt with if there was more diversified economic production within regions. And of course, as a final way, just like getting out of it, is that at country levels, public policies, especially fiscal, monetary, and other expenditure policies of the government should actually look at how growth can be driven in sectors which can generate large volumes of employment to majority of the citizens of the country who lost jobs during the pandemic. Thank you very much, Prof. Dinesh and the panel, as we get along in this very important conversation. Thank you very much.
Great. It was really great. Thank you very much, Dr. Onono. You really gave a global perspective with some examples of Kenya, and especially the export of tea and others. And as we found, Dr. Onono highlighted the impact of COVID-19, especially on the currency depreciation, how this currency depreciation will imply the implication of this currency depreciations towards the debt sustainability, towards reduced resource allocation, all these things. And finally, we really appreciate the suggestions she has supported, she has put like to deal with the debt with relief stimulus, and also some programs, stimulus program, and also she recommended, she has recommended to deal with the supply chain with the FDI, the foreign direct investment and country measures also. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Onono. And to the participants, I would like to request once again to put your question in the chat box so that we can take it during this discussion time. So finally, we are going to the third important pillar of sustainable development, that is the environment. You know, when this COVID-19 happened, we all the government they took the measure called the lockdown, and this lockdown policy has changed the energy demand, especially because of the transportation, because of his direct link with the transportation. And you have seen, many international borders were closed. Still, many of them are closed, and population were confined to their homes. That reduced the transport and changed the consumption pattern. And one of the articles published in Nature, it showed that the carbon dioxide emission also decreased by 17%. That was in April, last year. And at the peak of the emission, the individual countries decreased by minus 26% on average. Such kind of data were seen in the beginning of the lockdown. And beside that, there are some environmental impact of the COVID-19, like we have been using PPE, that's personal protective equipments like face mask, and the hand gloves, and also using a lot of sanitizers, sanitizing chemicals, and we are, disposing very haphazardly, and we are generating huge amount of hospital waste, which have the negative impact on the environment. So both the negative as well as the positive impacts are seen in the environment. So from this perspective, we'd like to invite Dr. Shobhakar Dhakal to deal with it, to explain, to elaborate on it. And to talk about Dr. Dhakal, he is a professor and dean at the School of Environment, Resource and Development, ESN Institute of Technology in Thailand. And he mainly lectures in the sustainable energy transition programs. And he's a product of the University of Tokyo, where he did his PhD. And he was also a special graduate student at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, back in 1999, and did his master's in engineering from MIT in 1996. And he is an expert of energy policy and economics, climate mitigation policies, and cities and climate change. And also he is a great contributor to the IPCC documents. So with this a brief introduction of Professor Dhakal, I would like to invite him to this panel discussion and put his opinion. Professor Shobhakar Dhakal, it's your time now.
Thank you, Professor Bhuju, and good evening and namaste to all. I think good afternoon to our colleagues in Europe, perhaps not yet good evening. First of all, thank you for this great opportunity. It's great to be connected with the colleagues in Nepal, also to outside. I think what I'll do is that I'll try to focus on impact of COVID on environment. I think Professor Bhuju already mentioned that there are lots of different types of implications. I'll try to go through, and Professor Bhuju, if I may, I'd like to show a few slides.
Yes, it's possible, sir. You are a co-host
Okay.
now. Yes.
Yeah. Can you see the slides?
Perfect. Very clear.
Okay. So let me put a few thoughts on COVID's impacts on environment. I think Professor Bhuju already mentioned that there are a wide range of positive and negative impacts of COVID-19 on environment. Some of those impacts are positive, some of those impacts are negative. Some of those impacts are in the short run, and some of those impacts are on the long run. I'll not talk much on indirect and long-term implications of COVID-19 on environment, but I'll try to follow the framework of a number of things that happened around the world because of the lockdown and restrictions, also greater use of biomedical equipments, PPE use and others. So those can be broadly classified as impact on low energy consumption. That's why reduction in global greenhouse gas emission. There is a reduction on pollution, particularly on the solid waste and also water pollution. Of course, the reduction in air pollution was quite evident, also including the reduction in noise pollution and many other things. Now, these are a positive aspect. Now, on negative side, of course, it has done lots of things, particularly biomedical waste, some of the waste management issues, and there are a number of other things it has unleashed. So let me quickly go through it, and my apologies that I might have many slides, but I'm not going to read slide, and in some cases maybe I'll say one or two points from the slides, and I'll move on. I think it doesn't need much explanation that air pollution reduction has happened during lockdown, whether it is in New Delhi, whether it is in Beijing, or whether it is in Kathmandu or Europe or North America. There are lots of evidence. Many researchers have documented how much emissions have been reduced during this pandemic period, especially during the lockdown period. Now, if you just look at visually, graphically, you can see clear difference, for example, in China between January and February. February, when the lockdown started in China, as you can see that this one is particularly NO2 density. You can see a visible impact. Now, of course, in our subcontinent also, this figure is from average of 2017 and 2019. From March 25 to April 25, average figure. Now, I'll show you the next slide, you will see visually how much is declined. Now, this is for 2020. So you can see that from this in 2017-19 average, visually, the concentration of NO2 has dropped down significantly. It's not only in this region, our one beautiful Kathmandu. I don't know when was the last time we could see the Mount Everest from Kathmandu. So visually, the air pollution, PM 2.5, PM 10, and many other pollutants declined during the pandemic period, which is a positive effect. This is not the way we want positive effect to come because of the COVID, but since COVID was there, we can't do anything about it. We could experience some of these benefits there. Now, I think Professor Bhuju already mentioned about reduction in global greenhouse gas emission and also energy consumption. I'll not get into the energy discussions. If you have interest on the impact of COVID-19 on energy, I suggest you to go to the website of International Energy Agency or International Renewable Energy Agency and places like Carbon Monitor or Global Carbon Project websites. But I would only tell you that the reduction on global greenhouse gas emission expected for 2020, that is basically CO2 emission, is 7% lower than 2019. This is the latest projection by our couple of colleagues from Global Carbon Project. So we could see that dent in emission in 2020. Now, which means that in different parts of the world, reduction in CO2 is going to happen. For example, in EU, 27 countries, minus 11%, United States minus 12%, in China, maybe minus 1.7% only. So we'll see this different range of greenhouse gas emission reduction. This particular one is CO2 emission in 2020. Now, of course, the largest drop, as I said earlier, is already we see in US, EU, and also India. But the China's emission drop is less because, as we know, that China recovered quite quickly. and also they have a lot of significant economic stimulus packages. Now, but this reduction in CO2 emission has not really led into the CO2 reduction in the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. The figure on your right, you can see that although emissions reduce, but we really don't see any meaningful impact on CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, because of course CO2 concentration in atmosphere is a function of stock that develops over time. That means we have to keep on reducing this emission for several years to come if we want to see the real impact. At the same time, as you can see in this figure, that this is monthly, right? So when China started lockdown, you can see that the emission reduction in China is dramatic. Then China a little bit recovered. Then US and India, EU 27, all these country emission has really dropped significantly at the month of April. But again, as we are starting to go to the normal business, you can see that we are again increasing CO2 emission as we progress towards the end of 2020. Similarly, most of those CO2 emission reduction came from, of course, the transport sector, a big chunk, because of the lockdown, but also from industry and also for power, and also aviation sector. Aviation sector also quite important. So that means we had some benefit there. Now, of course, the other benefits of this has been, COVID-19 highlighted the interrelationship between our natural and social systems. So social resilience definitely depends on our resilient support system. So that awareness creation has been one positive aspects, particularly around ecosystem, food system, and biodiversity. Now, of course, I'll not, going to speak much about these slides. I can share with you if later. There are a lot of documentation on reduction of water pollution. Be it the river in Ganga in Yamuna in India, or Grand Canal of Italy, or water pollution in Maldives, Thailand, or Indonesia. Lots of researchers have documented reduction in water pollution. Similarly, noise pollution. Globally, 360 million people are prone to hearing losses. So because of the lockdown, lots of noise pollution also has reduced, and lots of researchers have documented that reduction in noise pollution. Similarly, of course, the ecological restoration, because tourism industry, remember, is responsible for almost 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So also less tourist means we are allowing nature to really recover and restore themselves. So we have seen also lots of such effect, including returning of dolphins in the Bay of Bengal, or in the canal waterways or Port of Venice. So you can see that lots of things has happened because of the COVID. Now, on negative impact, of course, Professor Bhuju already mentioned the increase in the biomedical waste, which has significantly increased. A lot of safety equipment use and hazardous waste disposal is a problem. There is massive increase in municipal solid waste because of the over reliance on single-use plastic, or packaging material, because we rely on shipped items. We postpone waste recycling. We prohibit infected residents from sorting their waste, and also then we end up increasing landfilling and environmental pollution. Similarly, forest and other local biomass overutilization might have happened. One of the effect also is that financial resource shortage to do environmental management, because we have to focus on health aspects, and also slowing down the priority on environmental actions. These are some of the issues. Now, let me summarize in the interest of time. So what all this means is that, yes, COVID-19 had, of course, we didn't want COVID-19, but we have unintended positive effect, but also we have some negative effect in the environment. But how to negate negative effects in the short run, and how to learn from it, particularly this air pollution improvement, many other things, what happened, how to learn from it, how to use this as an opportunity as soon as possible for a long-term environmental security, whether it is ecological restoration or behavioral change in our daily life, or international cooperation, particularly SDG 17, or online business, less travel, greater use of renewable energy. So all these things we have to reflect upon. And also important is how to better devise stimulus package. There is a lot of focus on economic stimulus package, how to make sure that environmental sustainability is duly incorporated in those stimulus package. So I think fundamentally what it comes to is that it maybe could be early to predict some of the structural long-term changes that has unleashed by COVID-19 on many aspects of our life. But we have plenty things to learn from what we achieved on environmental grounds and really carry it forward for the longer term to make our environment sustainable. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's a great presentation, Professor Takal. In very short time, you could cover all aspects of environment, beginning from the air pollution to the climate change, that is the greenhouse gas effects. Well, of course, there are, we have fear that once this pandemic is controlled, or we get over from this, again, because of this economic bounce back, the environment will start deteriorating like we had the experiences back in 2009 depression. Anyway, we will discuss this later on. Once again, thank you so much, Professor Takal, for joining with us. And now, dear participants, as we have requested, we have entered into the second round of this panel discussion. You may please put your questions, put your opinion shortly in the chat box. This we are speaking because we have very limited time. So to value the time, we request you to put your questions in the chat box. And I have found some of the questions already there, like from Professor Ram Prasad Chaudhary. He has a question to Professor Parisi, and that thanks for the wonderful presentation. Like Nepal, Italy is also a leading country in terms of tourism industry. How that sector is affected in Italy, and what are the sustainable strategies? That's a question from Professor Chaudhary. Should I read another question, or you want to pick up this one, Professor Parisi?
Let me start. Do you see my shared screen?
Yes,
Yeah,
I can see. Yes.
The question of Dr. Chaudhary was actually relating to what we discussed already, Dinesh. With the,
yes, please.
With the, yes, and these are, for example, sorry, it's in Italian. This is an evaluation of a few months ago, and therefore we think that in 2020 we'll lose some 30 billion euro. 60% less, and therefore a disaster for the tourism community. And foreign visitors crashed down 93% versus the 2019. And these people was spending 45 billion euro in Italy. And therefore, this is really a disaster from this point of view. Forget the cruise ship. Well, what has been done for sustainability? Extraordinary allowance to the compartment for people working in restaurants, etc. We put in place social shock absorbers, etc. And this was now the keywords. Staycation, to stay around home, to do the so-called under-tourism, to foster the idea of going around to see what is around you, because you cannot go abroad, and therefore Italians to visit Italy via individual trips, familial trips, digital planning, the so-called poor tourism. And therefore possibly we'll need to develop what is called a new paradigm of tourism, just for this to try to cope with the problem. May I go on, Dinesh, with the other question very quickly to leave people place for other?
Sure.
Yeah. The second one, why the pandemic seems affecting high developed countries rather than low developed countries? Well,
yes.
I have another. I put out this one, for example, and this is a possible explanation from for example, why in Africa is not so diffused. Well, the first answer and the most simple one is because there is no diagnostic capabilities. There are not enough swabs, not enough serological tests, and therefore is difficult to realize if there is something wrong. Another more interesting, more intriguing possibilities could be this one. We know that in sub-Saharan population, there is an alteration in the spike protein, and we know that because using some antihypertensive drugs, the so-called ACE inhibitors, these are less effective in sub-Saharan population patients because there is this alteration in the spike protein. Therefore, it is possible that this population will not be so much affected by the virus as other population. Actually, this is something that is under control, under study now, because, for example, the Afro-American in USA are exactly affected exactly at the same rate than white and Anglo-Saxon and Protestant people. But this could be another possibility of explaining why in these countries there is a less, also possibly there is more distribution of the population, but in some African countries, you know, the population is more diffused. I don't want to enter in the Kenyan situation. Abarigani Dr. Onono min ningependa sana kuzungumza kidogo nawe na Kiswahili lakini sijui kama inawezekana kuendelea. Itarudi mara kwa mara nitarudi kule kukuonana. Sorry, I just spoke a little bit in Swahili with Dr. Onono. I love Nepal, but I love also Africa. In Africa, people is more diffused around in villages, and therefore there is less interaction. This could be another possibility. The third question, well, actually, Dr. Chowdhury was kind enough to pose the question to me, but actually,
yes,
with Professor
from
Dakal,
Kurukshetra University.
This is for a question for Professor Dakal. What I can say from my own medical point of view is just this one. We experienced that under the lockdown, there was a huge decrease in preterm birth. Why? This is extremely intriguing as an observation. It seems that during lockdown, the mothers are possibly more quiet, going less around, a less polluted environment, and therefore the amount of preterm birth decreased, but by 10-20%. It's a very important decrease. Therefore, something for sure in the environment happened, but of course, this is the playground of Professor Dakal. I'm a poor surgeon, and therefore I must be very careful in entering this field. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I hope to have answered to the questions. Of course, if you want me to say something more, I'm here.
Shall we move to another field, and then we'll come back to you later, okay, Professor Parisi? All right, so let's move on to the next question. This is on the economics. I would like to draw the attention of Professor Onono. Here we have a question from Dr. Samir Thapa. Today, BBC advised that there was nearly a month delay in declaring the pandemic. What would have been the impact on the respective discipline, if any? Is the question clear to you? I think quite.
Who has to answer?
I really don't understand what it is asking. I can see it here in the chat platform. BBC advised that there was nearly a month delay in declaring the pandemic.
Yeah.
What would have been the impact in the respective disciplines, if any?
If I want, I can start because this was my observation number 3, early warning. The warning has not at all been timely. It has been delayed and very possibly because of political reasons. Of course, if we could have blocked interactions from China, etc., very much earlier, possibly the diffusion of the pandemic could have been restricted. There are some data saying that possibly the pandemic started during the Olympics of the armies in September in Wuhan. There were the Olympic Games devoted to the different armies of different countries, with a lot of people coming from many countries around the world and getting back and bringing back the virus. As I told you, we are sure that the virus was present in Italy the 10th of November 2019. The pandemic was declared in 21 of March, 11 of March, if I remember well. Therefore, not only 1 month before, but many months before. The first whistleblower in Wuhan, the doctor who said there is something wrong, was put in jail. Thereafter, he died because of COVID. Therefore, if we allow politics to enter into the ruling of medical issues, we'll enter into such problems. For sure, blocking the pandemic very early, if I have a tsunami early warning system, and because of many reasons, I don't want the people to know that a tsunami is arriving, I leave a lot of people dying. This is the problem. And therefore, for sure, we must forget the virus doesn't care about politics. The virus doesn't care.
Yes.
This is the problem.
Yes, Professor Parisi, yes, the coronavirus and virus doesn't care the politics, but I'm again pulling Dr. Onono to elaborate because Noam Chomsky, he has recently mentioned that this COVID-19 and failure of the controlling this disease, especially in the US and industrial countries, is another colossal failure of the neoliberal economic policy. Do you agree with this? Could you elaborate something on it from your economic perspective?
Just repeat the statement.
He said this failure of controlling the COVID-19 is the failure of the neoliberal economic policy.
Okay, my understanding of it is that what is there is that we have the COVID and the experiences that we have got along implies that we must rethink our economic policies. I want to draw from some of the responses that many countries were implementing at the height of the pandemic. For example, when we were even calling on banks to give relief on debt, people who had debt in financial institutions, and allowing individuals to go back to the banks, and it becomes a public announcement, unlike in the past, where it was very difficult at individual level even to walk to a financial institution and renegotiate a loan. We were also seeing a situation where the governments were stepping in to review some of the policies relating to taxation, relating to some of the public positions that had been taken before. And therefore, to some extent, it is true that the existence of this pandemic has thrown us to a point where we have to rethink some of the ways in which we handle our public policies at the economic front. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now let's move to the environmental sector again. I would like to draw the attention of Professor Dakal. There are several questions relating to what you have made presented just now. Have you checked it, Professor Dakal, or should I read it? There is one from Pashupati Koirala that how the governance is being weak with environmental impact, and did you observe any thorough research? It is being most important in developing countries. The question is directed to Professor Dakal.
Yes, thank you. I didn't understand question very precisely, but maybe the question how government is being weak with environmental impact. Yeah, so I'm just trying to guess what Pashupati is trying to ask here, but definitely COVID-19 impact environment, right? So I'm just trying to guess what he's asking here. Of course, our governments are in developing countries are generally weaker, and environmental impacts, in order to manage environmental impacts, definitely we have lots of pressures there. And when government, machinery or our basic, how to say, operation is weak, then of course the resilience becomes already weak. So if that kind of links happen, Pashupati, would you like to elaborate a little bit what precisely you are asking here? Anything?
Pashupati sir, are you there? The sense I would make out of this question is that the research on environmental aspect is very, very important at this juncture, but many of the developing countries are not paying attention, not giving priority in research. So that is his question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the evidence-based policy making and evidence-based planning is definitely less practiced in developing countries. I'm not saying that it is always practiced in developed countries also, but generally evidence-based planning practice is less in developing countries. So from that viewpoint, we are not very well prepared. From that viewpoint, when disaster happens, we don't understand the gravity of it. We don't understand how to respond to it. So definitely that leads to, of course, unimaginable kind of outcomes, but also generally the weakness in governance leads us into a constraining situation in addressing either pandemic or other environmental impacts. So which basically means that we need to improve our system. We need to do evidence-based planning. We have to build our resilience. And I'm hoping that this pandemic has taught us some lesson that we have to coexist with the nature. We have to build our healthcare system. We have to build a resilient system. So that kind of awareness, that kind of policy thrust, if we can develop from this particular event, I think we'll be would be doing great in the future.
Thank you. Great. So before we conclude this this panel discussion, we have a participant from Finland, I guess, Android Blue Droid. Android, do you have any questions to this expert of the panel? Well, we will wait for him. And before
Dinesh sir, they are not allowed to speak. So
I see.
Either we need to make them co-host or just take the chat question.
Well, he has not put any question here. Maybe I can check out if he's there. Okay, ask to unmute. Okay, now he can raise a question. Android, are you there? You can unmute. While waiting for him, let's welcome Professor Vasilios Papalois for the special remarks. Professor Papalois is Android. Are you there?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yeah, please. Do you have any? Well, no, no. I'm waiting for Papalois. No, Android, not. Just a moment, Professor Papalois. Shall we wait for a minute? Because
Yeah.
there is a participant from Finland, and but I don't see him asking a question. So, all right. So we will. I think he's not there anyway. So we move ahead because we are already 6:30 in Kathmandu. So we have Dr. Vasilios Papalois to give a special remark here. Dr. Papalois is a professor and professor at the Imperial College in London. And he's the president of the enlarged executive of European Union of Medical Specialists. And he has specialties in transplant surgery, and he leads the Transplant Center of Excellence focusing on high risk and extended criteria kidney and pancreas transplantation. And he's trained in St. Mary's Hospital and University of Minnesota. And he also chairs the ethics committee of the Avon and Somerset Constabulary, a member of the Research Ethics Committee. He is of the UK Ministry of Defense. So with this brief introduction, I would like to request Professor Papalois for his special remarks.
Thank you so very much.
Yes, please.
Thank you so very much, Professor Puju, and dear colleagues, for your kind invitation to be part of this prestigious panel and forum. I'm most grateful. I'm delighted to see old friends like Luigi, with whom we have worked for many, many years, and he had many stations in European surgery, including, of course, the UMS. And hopefully I will make some new friends today and beyond today through this panel and our collaboration, and I'm looking forward to that. Just to say that the European Union of Medical Specialists, of which I have the honor to be president, is an organization that has 62 years of history, more than 6 decades. It represents 40 countries in Europe, which are represented through their national medical associations. So through them, it represents 1.6 million medical specialists across Europe, and it has more than 70 specialist bodies that do all the work on the ground. And also it has a series of collaborations all over the world with professional organizations, scientific societies, colleges, educational organizations in various projects. So I sincerely hope that this small intervention at the end of your panel today and our brief discussion will be the beginning of such a collaboration with Nepalese colleagues, and we will be delighted at some stage to meet you live in Europe or in Nepal. Listening to the wonderful presentations by the colleagues who presented this afternoon, I have to say that it demonstrated what I believed from the very beginning. The pandemic showed us very clear that as human beings, we face problems which are common problems. COVID-19 was not a Nepalese problem or a British problem or an American problem or an Australian problem. It was a human race problem and continues to be. And it demonstrated very, very clearly that common problems require common solutions from humanity and collaborative solutions. Nobody can say we're doing fine in Europe, we're doing fine in the States, we're doing fine in India, we don't care about the rest of the world. We can't say that. If it is to be fine, we have to be fine together. If it is to be doomed, we are going to be doomed together. So it demonstrated more clearly than any other time that common problems require common solutions. And sustainability is along the lines of it. So when it comes to common solutions, where are the areas where us as a pan-European organization working with colleagues all over the world see areas where these common solutions are needed? In the field of medicine, which we serve, which is my vocation, it was very clear that we need to rethink completely about the clinical pathways of all elements of specialist practice. And we need to redesign more or less the way we provide medicine, the content and the format and the means of it. If it is to survive the pandemic, and if it is to have after the pandemic something that is meaningful for all humanity. This is clear like day, and I believe that this is one area where we need this international collaboration in the rethinking and redesigning of the way we practice and provide healthcare across the world. In order to do that, two areas where again we need collaboration is the development of international registries, where we are able to report all the activity related to COVID and the lessons learned from that. And the registries teach us the lesson that there is power in numbers. And from this power, we can learn and we can implement. And also need to rethink internationally about the pathophysiology of this virus and the way the human race has reacted to it. Because most unfortunately, we know very little about it. It was a Chinese general that said many, many centuries ago that if you know yourself and you know your enemy, you must not fear the outcome of 100 battles. Unfortunately, with COVID, we don't know the enemy and we don't know ourselves, or we know very little. That's why the outcome of the battle is not particularly clear. This is the second area. As colleagues around the world, we need to collaborate to learn more about this virus, to learn about our pathophysiology and response to it, and plan the way for the future. So common solutions, starting with redesigning of clinical pathways, and this through international registries, power in numbers, and better understanding of our pathophysiology and reaction to the problem. Beyond this, and especially in the areas which is the area of expertise of our organization, we will start with the issue of training. One of the areas we have worked for almost 6 decades, Professor Parigi being an outstanding leader in this field, is to harmonize training requirements for specialists across Europe and maybe. The pandemic proved crystal clearly the need to harmonization and this benchmarking across the world. If it is for healthcare professionals to be able to offer their services credibly, not only their country of origin, but in a much broader and wider spectrum around the world. It is something that is desperately needed. In the same way, we believe that the projects that we have for accrediting training centers and trainers are equally important, because as I always say, important as it is to accredit the product, the trainee, is much more important to accredit the machine that produces it, which is the training center and the trainers. And this again has to have a global character so that healthcare professionals across the world can offer their services credibly and reliably. And last but not least is the issue of continuing medical education and professional development. Again, common solution into this. If it is to survive as professionals, if it is to be able to develop ourselves and adjust ourselves to the new realities imposed by the pandemic and many other challenges around the world, we need to have this continued development and as professionals. And again, in this, we seek collaborations all over the world. I believe that the pandemic taught us many, many things. We had some excellent presentations about the world of medicine, the world of economics, which were massively, massively important. And we have many developments that we all debate. We talk about vaccinations, we talk about antiviral medications that might be available by the end of the year. We talk about PPE, many different options. In my opinion, colleagues, the lesson I learned, and I hope all of us have learned from that, is that what is going to get through that, all of us, is the triumph of the human spirit. It's human humanism more than anything else, more than vaccinations, medicines, PPEs, or anything else, is the awareness of humanity to see the problem as a common problem, deal with it as a common problem, as one, and get through it. And if we manage to get that, I believe that COVID-19, with all its tragedy and its cause, might be begin for a humanity for the year. As I told in organ, we are open and actively collaborations around the world. I sincerely hope this afternoon and this intervention will be and I'm looking forward to hearing your suggestions. Warm congratulations for all your work. I'm most grateful for being with you this afternoon for me, evening for you, and I'm looking forward to our future work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you indeed, Professor Papalios. It's wonderful. What a mantra, we call it mantra. You said, for a common problem, we must have the common solution, and that is by the international collaboration. Thank you so much for highlighting the collaboration among the humanity, among the scientists, among the technologists. Thank you so much. And the professor has elaborated why we have to redesign the healthcare pathways, why we need to continue the medical education and trainings and harmonizations. Thank you so much, Professor Papalios. So with this, we come to conclude the panel discussion today. We had, as we mentioned, Professor Pariji, Professor Onono, Professor Takal, and finally Professor Papalios to elaborate on the impact of COVID-19 on various aspects, especially the three dimensions, the three pillars of sustainable development. Also, they gave some prescription for the post-pandemic era. So with this, I sign out and I hand over this mic to Dr. Meena Bohra to continue the session. Dr. Bohra.
Thank you very much, Dinesh sir. And I'd like to thank you again for such a lively discussion. And I'm also equally thankful on behalf of Scientist Nepal towards all the panel experts, and also a special remark by Professor Papalios was indeed very insightful. So now we are towards the end of today's session, and to do the ending, for the concluding remark, I would like to request the chair of the session, Professor Dr. Kedar Rijal, for the concluding remark and vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Meena Bohra. And first of all, I would like to namaste and a greeting from Nepal and all the very valuable panelists as well as the valuable participants. The Scientist Nepal has been working nearly 1 year. The motto of this Scientist Nepal is how to help to the society, having the knowledge and practice as an individual, as the group, those who believes in the science. Even at the education level, Nepal is not very much higher compared to the developed part of the world, but whatever, we are in the different positions, university, research institution, government, and non-government, working in the different forum, how to transfer the knowledge and skills and best practices to minimize the impact of COVID in the context of rural and urban of Nepal. That's why knowingly and unknowingly, this scientific forum has been trying to help the people, those who live in the different sections of the society. For that one, we have been invited many experts across the world, and they are sharing the experiences, how we can benefit their practices, their knowledge, their skills, their wisdom, bringing to our society. Indeed, is a very good opportunity for a scientific forum of Nepal to transfer the knowledge and skill to the society, our community. So to some degree, we try in our best today. On the behalf of this Scientist Nepal Forum, I really would like to thank you to 4 panelists, Dr. Pariji, Professor Pariji, Professor Onon, Professor Dhakal, and Professor Papalios, for their valuable insight, valuable thoughts, valuable experiences, which is really, really good in the country of Nepal. And we try to, again, use in our personal to this forum to the how we can help the society. See, there is impact in the economics, there is impact in the livelihood, there is impact in health and all sector of the society. So I really thank on the behalf of this forum and myself, and thank you very much for your time and sharing. And I really thank you all the valued participants. As we discussed in early sessions, we'll try to transfer our knowledge and skill to our how we can help the society, even say give the suggestion to the government of Nepal or in the some social leader or in our institutions or where we are working. So saying these things, I really thank you all the say hardworking our Dr. Praveen, Dr. Meena Bohra, and Dr. Narayanji for their have been working since long time and this to make the active this forum. In days to come also, as Dr. Praveen mentioned that we are trying to have a collaboration across the world to the different scientists, practitioner, policymaker to share the knowledge and experiences for the better humanity across the world. Thank you very much. Thank you all for your time. So goodbye and try to be safe. Thank you.
Bye.
Can we open everyone the microphone and greet each other with a little bit of a
Thank you.
message
Yeah.
of being
Thank you.
so
Thank you very
silent
much,
all the day
Professor.
long?
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. It was a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye
Good
bye.
Thank
to
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Perez,
Kukuonana,
thank you.
natumaini kukuonana
Thank you.
tena kule Nairobi labda.
Karibu sana.
Ningependa, ningefurahi.
Karibu sana.
Ingewezekana.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dinesh,
Thank you.
now
Namaste.
that
Bye.
we are out,
Thank you all.
out of
Thank you very much.
officialities, please take care of Professor Papalois because he didn't said that he's the big boss of the biggest European, is the biggest European medical organization
Yeah.
acting as a scientific advisor to the European Union. You
Yes.
are now building up the Midwestern University Faculty of Medicine. Moreover, the postgraduate specialist training and the UMS has arranged the European training requirements that represent now the top level standard in the world, I could say. Therefore, a huge interaction in future could be extremely effective from this point of view. Let's say that this could be a consequence, a spin-off, a positive spin-off of these dreadful pandemics. Is an idea. Thereafter, I want to bring Vasilios at the bottom of Everest if he's able to follow me for 11 days until the Kalapatar. Vasilios is something absolutely fantastic. You don't know how fantastic is Nepal. I ran up and down all Nepal, not in Mustang. I'm still missing the Mustang, but Mustang is a little bit more difficult to go there. Who knows? But
I'm really looking forward to the collaboration with all my heart, and I'm looking forward to hearing your proposals. Climbing up in Everest is something that we can discuss, but I'm truly looking forward to the collaboration, and I really mean that. Our doors are open.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
bye-bye to
Ciao.
everybody. See you.
Thank you. See
Thank you,
you
everybody.
soon. Bye-bye.
And
Namaste.
I think we need to thank to NREN also who
Yes.
make possible to make the live in Facebook,
Yes.
as well as help us to join globally with a different continent and people from different countries to us. Thank you to NREN and thank you to all participants.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Bye-bye.
Kuzu.
Bye-bye.
Is the organizer that has to close because otherwise we'll not go.
Okay.
Don't
Okay.
throw
Then
us outside. We'll go on
so
chatting and discussing among friends.
very unwillingly, I'm ending the meeting now. Very unwillingly.
Okay.
Bye-bye.